Hi, my name is Nils Terringer, and I am here with Mr. Bruce P. Grether today. And I just got done reading his new book called The Secret of the Golden Phallus. How are you today, Bruce?
I'm wonderful. How are you doing?
Doing great. So I came across your
Excellent.
work, I guess about a month ago now, because I'm making a personal documentary called The Blue Flower, and it's about my search to, find enlightenment, to awaken.
Yeah.
And the metaphor of a blue flower for me is very powerful, and so your book actually goes, very much in depth, much more than I've ever read before, about that metaphor of a blue lotus in ancient
Mhm.
Egypt. So that's how I, came across your work, and I'm so honored to be here with you today to interview you. So I have a lot of questions.
Okay.
My first one is just what is the secret of the golden phallus really about? Can you just give us a brief overview?
Um, yeah, I'll try to be brief. um, After writing a book, it's hard to boil it down, but it's really great because it's a good discipline for a writer to look at the table of contents and go, okay, what was this book about?
Mhm.
I would say that what the secret of the golden phallus is about reclaiming our erotic nature and the sacred as one. And I think this is a little more challenging for men for a number of reasons in our current civilization and our current cultures on the whole planet, because we live in what they call a patriarchal civilization,
Mhm.
and male sexuality, the male body, particularly our generative organs, the penis, is very taboo. Masturbation is just like sniggered and laughed at, or else it's considered, you know, beneath contempt and silly, or else it's even considered evil. I mean, you might go to hell,
Yeah.
you know. So I feel like these are natural and inevitable parts of being human, and they are good parts of being human. The body, sexuality, our genital organs, all that to me is sacred. And I'd say that the book is about encouraging men to reclaim this for themselves.
Okay, so it's a very sexual book, and it's also geared mostly for men.
Absolutely. I like to use the term erotic because the word sexual, to me, this is just my word use, but I use the word sexual for reproductive
Oh, okay.
science and, sexual behavior in general. There's not a bad term, but erotic is a little different because I think it's much easier to view the term erotic sort of separated out of biological reproduction
Okay.
into a realm of sensation and experience, even spirituality. Definitely, this book is about reclaiming the sacred and the erotic as one, which I believe they naturally are.
That sounds really awesome. So, what is the golden phallus actually?
The golden phallus, as I talk about it in this book, I wrote this book aimed at the reader, and I use the second person you a lot. And the point about that is that your penis, if you view it as a golden phallus, is a means of transformation, growth. You can even call it healing. That's a word that's tricky to use in spiritual circles because
Right.
the AMA comes after you if you claim. I don't claim to heal people, but I do offer people um, awareness and practices that I think can be therapeutic, that can be beneficial to
Yeah, for
you, to
sure.
your health and well-being. So,
Okay. All right.
yeah.
So, I mean, what's your background? How did you actually come to write this book?
I had a personal breakthrough in about 1995 in which I, like most men, loved sexual sensations and eroticism, and I loved to masturbate. I think most men do, whether they want to admit it or not, or talk about it or not. But I didn't ever really learn how to sustain it and stay in that state indefinitely. I knew about what men call edging, which is just getting close to ejaculatory inevitability and never going over for a while. But I didn't learn to really live in this state. And I would say that since 1995, I've spent most of my life in this state, in a sense. Not literally aroused and masturbating 24/7, but I think that when you learn to do this for longer periods, and it's not just about long periods, but it's quality, sensation, and experience, it changes you in the rest of your daily life too. You end up a
Huh.
different kind of person. Yeah.
Wow. Wow, cool. All right. Well, there's a lot, for me personally, I'm interested in this metaphor for a blue flower.
Mm-hmm.
which comes from
Yeah.
ancient Egypt, and there's just a
Right.
a bunch about ancient Egypt in the book. What made
Yes.
you choose that as a point of emphasis? And can you tell me a little bit more about your metaphor for the blue flower?
Sure. Sure. I've always been drawn to ancient Egypt for some reason. You could call it cellular memory or reincarnation. I'm not sure I believe in reincarnation in a metaphysical sense, but we all have cellular memory and genetic memory. And in the history of the world, I think that the ancient Egyptians are as influential or more so as the ancient Greeks in Western culture. And this is kind of overlooked because everybody talks about Greek philosophy. Well, the Egyptians were the first people to write on paper, to sit at desks, and so forth, but they never really withdrew themselves from nature. They were surrounded by plants and animals,
Hmm.
and they were not afraid of their gods. Unlike the slightly earlier culture, the Sumerians, who were kind of afraid of their gods, they had to appease them, like, "Ugh, if we don't do the right thing, the sun might not rise." The Egyptians considered their gods to be kind of part of their extended family. They were part of nature, and the gods all kind of lived in the west or up above or around them. But they had sort of an animistic view. Everything was alive. And I learned early on how um, I've been studying Egypt for 45 years since I was a little kid, probably, at least. And I've always loved Hinduism also, and I learned that there's a very strong connection there.
Hmm.
And when you look at the earliest phallic gods in the Hindu tradition, really Shiva is the one who stands out.
Wait, there
Lord
were phallic
Lord
gods?
Shiva. Yeah, the symbol for Lord Shiva is the Shiva lingam. It's a black stone pillar usually that's just polished and shiny, and it's his erection. It's his penis, and some Hindus don't want to admit that. They have a certain prudishness as well.
Yeah, that just seems so sacrilegious. Yeah.
It does, and there will be people. I'm equally offensive to all major religions, I hope, in this book, because I don't seek to offend anybody. But if somebody has a sacred cow, the Egyptians had sacred cows, and that was one of the connections. So I actually talk quite a bit about the Brahman, the Vedic, and the Hindu traditions of India, but also ancient Egypt, because Egypt was even more phallocentric.
Okay.
Meaning, a lot of their beliefs and practices, their images and their ideas centered around the male erect penis.
Wow.
It was a very common image, an important thing to them, and a beautiful thing. They didn't laugh at it. They didn't snigger at it. They celebrated it. Maybe they would joke about it. They were not perfect people, but they were kind of amazing. And the Egyptians didn't really have a lot of history. They were so well protected from enemies along the Nile valleys, but they spent several thousand years just adding to their culture, like the Hindus still do, and never throwing anything away. It was kind of like whatever works. And supposedly sex sells. And in advertising, it's often a little subtle, kind of like Madonna at the. I didn't watch the Super Bowl game, but I saw her performance on
As did
YouTube
I.
the next day, and it was pretty awesome. She was pretty Egyptian, right?
Yeah.
Well, did you see? She started out, and then she went into being a nun in outer space and all that. Anyway, so that's in several nutshells, that's
Okay,
why.
so in ancient Egypt, this blue flower, this blue lotus that they used, you're saying in your book, and this is the first time I've heard it, is
Yeah.
that that's actually a symbol for a phallus.
Well, it's a deity. Yeah, like everything, that's the great thing about Egypt is everything is a god or goddess. And what is called the blue lotus in Egyptology is really a water lily named Nymphea caerulea.
Okay.
And the Victorian Egyptologists didn't know exactly what plant it really was. It was identified a little bit later. But to the Egyptians, this flower was sacred, and it was part of one of their many dualities, which was the papyrus and the lotus. The papyrus represented the northern delta in Egypt, which was close to the Mediterranean because there were huge swamps of just nothing but papyrus.
Okay.
And then along the river lagoons, there were an awful lot of these blue lotuses growing in the southern part of Egypt. And they called the blue lotus Nefertum, which is the name of a god who is called the Lord of Fragrances. And he's also called the you could translate his name as the handsome young phallic god who creates the world by pleasuring himself.
Wow. Okay. So
uh,
that's the ancient Egypt's sort of metaphor that you're explaining in the first part of your book, but then you actually get into very specific details about, that's very applicable to men today. And I guess, the term you use is mindful masturbation. Do you want to talk a little bit about what mindful masturbation is?